Okay, hi everyone. We're going to get started and folks will continue to join, but good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for today's program. My name is Jessie Grieve Carlson. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Associate Director of External Affairs and Affiliate Relations at the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And Lily, if you could just go to the next slide real quick. Thank you so much. I also help run NGLCC's Transgender and Gender Expansive Initiative, or TGX initiative. The TGX initiative provides targeted support, programming, and opportunities to LGBT business enterprise certified TGX business owners with the ultimate goal of economic empowerment for some of our most marginalized yet most innovative members of the LGBTQ+ community. You'll hear the acronym TGX throughout the program, which stands for Transgender and Gender Expansive. And it's meant to refer to all individuals, trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary, gender expansive, who fall in this umbrella. And before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to our local affiliate LGBTQ+ chambers of commerce across the country who partnered with NGLCC on this event. If you are tuning in and you're part of your local chamber, give a shout out in the chat here and mention which local chamber you're a member of. I know that we got a lot of folks on the call who are part of chambers, and even one of our panelists is a VP as well. So I see Wisconsin in the chat here. I see Greater Houston. Thank you all so much for being here. Orpib, Colorado. That's amazing. So I will now hand it off to my colleague, Gunnar Gardner, to share a bit more about Transgender Day of Visibility in Action before we get started with the panel. So Gunnar, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Jessie. And thank you again to everyone here joining us from chambers all across the country, business owners, and everyone. We're so happy to have you here and celebrating this day and this program with us. Once again, my name is Gunnar Gardner. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Senior Membership Manager and Regional Certification Associate at the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, as well as NGLCC New York. March 31st is International Transgender Day of Visibility in Action, and we are so glad to be able to come together with you all and celebrate the amazing TGX individuals who make up our NGLCC community. And while we do have so much to celebrate, I think it is important that we also pause and acknowledge and think about the TGX lives that we have already lost this year. Visibility is so incredibly important, but it can also still be dangerous in our society. So with that, I would like to have a brief moment of silence and honor those that we have lost along the way until now. Thank you. Thank you all. It is important to acknowledge and hold grief and struggle at the same time that we honor those here with us today. So I thank you all so much for doing that with me. And with that, I'm pleased to hand it over to Chris Crespo, Director at EY, leading diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. Chris will be our moderator for today's discussion. So Chris, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you, Jess. I am excited to be joining you today. My pronouns are she, they. I do identify as non-binary, and it has been a journey for me in identifying as part of this community. I'm going to ask our panelists, please come off mute and onto video, if you will, and we'll start the introduction process. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, but I'm going to start with Nathaniel, then Shan, then Nika, then Deanna, because that's the order you're on my screen. So I'm assuming you might be on that order on everyone else's screen, but just give us your quick, who are you? And then we'll start into some questions to learn a little bit more about your journeys, your business experience, and what brings you here today. So Nathaniel, will you kick us off?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name's Nathaniel Clausen. My pronouns are he, him. My favorite job is being a dad. I got 3 kids, a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, and an 11-year-old. My other job is being a project manager in Spencer, Indiana for Boston Scientific. I'm also the global lead for our Pride Employee Resource Group. And I'm also the Transgender Advocacy Director for Spencer Pride, Inc. And Spencer, Indiana is the smallest town in America to have an LGBTQ plus community center. And Spencer has a population of about 2,400 people. And our Pride Festival brings about 7,000 people to the town. And really, my reason for being here is one, my youngest daughter, but also my goal in life is to make wherever I am a more welcoming place for all people.
Excellent. Shan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shan Randall. My pronouns are any pronouns, as long as it's respectful. And I identify as trans non-binary. And I am the director / owner at Empowerify. And in Empowerify, we do program management for projects that benefit marginalized groups.
Is it Nico?
Hello, my name is Nico Storment. My pronouns are he and they, and I'm the founder and CEO of Rosen Creative House. Rosen Creative House is a live production company. We also do video production. We do things like the Trans Futures stage at San Francisco Pride, Vamp X Pride, the official Pride after party. We work with a lot of artists to create corporate campaigns, nonprofit campaigns. I'm a trans man. I came out when I was 18. I'm 26 now, and I started my business at 22. So I'm just really excited to be part of the space. Thanks.
Excellent. Deanna.
Hi, thank you, Chris. My name is Deanna Marie Jones. My pronouns are she, her. I do identify as transgender. I was someone who was late to the game, but nonetheless, I've tried to make up for my time. I transitioned about 4 years ago at the age of 54. I work at Cisco Systems. I am part of the lead for their ERG, which is the Employee Resource Group. I also started my own company, Deanna Jones Now, which provides transgender consulting to companies that are wishing to increase their inclusivity and openness towards their employees to make sure that all employees feel welcomed and don't want to leave their company. I am also the vice president for Harmony, which is the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce located in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. So I hope everyone
you.
can feel the excitement of our panelists. Not only do we have a great representation of the trans and gender expansive community on the call, but also in all of those in our community with a parent involved as well. So thank you all from the get-go. I know this is a day that it is, when we talk about Transgender Day of Visibility, it does have some reflection back to our journeys and what got us here as well. So as we tell a little bit about why this is important to us, I'm looking forward to hearing a little of your journeys infused in there as well. And Nathaniel, how about if we start with you? And I think you're gonna help get us all. Hopefully, you won't get us all crying, but I think we might end up getting there from what I've heard. I understand you're the parent of an amazing transgender expansive daughter. Can you share just a little bit about your family story?
Yes, I'd love to. So my favorite job is being a dad, and my youngest, she started telling us who she is between the ages of 2 and 3. Basically, we had dress up clothes from our first 2 kids, and my youngest wouldn't leave the house without a dress or a tutu on. And really seeing her, we always let her do her thing. And one day, she started to withdraw, like at about age 3. And I've never seen a 3-year-old be depressed. And it was really troubling for me and my wife. And my wife and I started doing some reading. And really, one of the first books we ever read was Becoming Nicole. And it's a great book about twins, and one of them is transgender. And it was right about this time that I started at Boston Scientific, and they have an LGBTQ plus employee resource group that I'm now the lead of, but I joined that resource group to learn more. And back in 2016, they had National PFLAG come to a few of our campuses, and really they were doing presentations about what it means to be LGBTQ plus. And one of the first presentations was at Spencer, and it was they were talking about coming out and journeys and things like that. And I remember getting up and talking about my daughter and how she was telling us who she is. And she hadn't socially transitioned at the time. And so so please excuse my use of the wrong pronouns for my daughter in this quote. But I said, if you see my son at the store in his dress, please come up to him and tell him he looks pretty. And that was, and we let her socially transition at 3.5. And we basically said, if she changes her mind, she'll at least know that we love her and listen to her. And she hasn't changed who she is, and she's taught us so much about ourselves. Luckily, we live in a very inclusive city, Bloomington, Indiana, and we hadn't faced any issues until the last few years. But our state legislature passed a sports ban in 2022 and the gender affirming healthcare ban in 2023. And my family is a part of the lawsuit with the ACLU against the state of Indiana for the gender affirming healthcare ban. And there was an injunction that was in place against the law, and it was just lifted by the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And the law went into effect on February 28th, 2024. And it makes me very sad. And my family speaks out because so many families with trans kids can't speak out. And luckily, I work for a company that will reimburse me for travel to get health care that's illegal in my state. And my speaking out is looked at as living Boston Scientific's caring value. And I just can't say enough about my company. And really, I just try and push hard so other people don't have to.
And I think that a lot of times I hear people say, well, why don't you just move? I've heard that question so many times. Can I ask for your 30-second rebuttal on that?
We have worked so hard to make a community, and we don't want to move. And the other piece to it is we live in a dark blue dot in a dark red state, and it's just really tough to even think about moving.
So, and I'll ask one more, and then I'm moving on. But Nathaniel, how has you're the ERG lead at Boston Scientific, you noted.
Mm-hmm.
How has your company played a part in your journey, and how has your role in the ERG helped you in this journey?
Oh, it's one of those where in I got involved with the ERG very early. And really, I don't think without the employee resource group, I don't think I would have really understood my daughter. And I think that, I think employee resource groups are so beneficial, not just for the people that are part of that group, but it helps people understand what all is going on for that group. And they're just so educational. And really, I know what my site VP, he was watching the news, and there was a news story about my family, and I was speaking out at the State House, and he forwarded that picture. He took a picture of the TV and forwarded that picture to many of the higher ups in the company, and basically said that I was living Boston Scientific's caring value. And really, in the company I was at before, I would have gotten fired for speaking out.
No, thank you. I think those are important to point out. What people can do and what our companies can do can make a big difference for all of us. I'm going to shift now. Deanna, you said you came late to the game, so it's a little bit of a different story than what Nathaniel's living through. But can you share a little bit about, I know you are in this space right now focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting, as well as just joining us here today. So in support of TGX employees. But can you speak a little bit about your journey and what led you to doing this?
Sure, I'd love to. And I would just like to add that my story is exactly like Nathaniel's. I was 4 years old and I was going into my bathroom, our family bathroom, pulling my sister's clothes out of the hamper and putting them on. Now, I had no idea what it was. I didn't see a movie. I didn't read a book. My sisters never forced me to dress up. I had no idea about it. And I'd like to add for state legislatures that you can go ahead and take this out of the schools all you want. We're still going to be here because this was there when I was 4 years old. To me, after I got into school, it felt like everybody was drinking ice water and I was drinking something sour because I knew I just didn't fit in. And I carried this with me from the time I was 4 until I was in my 50s. And to not get to be yourself for that long can truly provide trauma to a person. And I did not know what to do with this. So I decided I had to force myself to be normal. I did those things that men are supposed to do. We all know when we're born and we're assigned a gender, 1,000 decisions have now been made for us. I didn't want any of those decisions, but I lived with them because if you go outside of the box, then you're severely penalized. I think anybody who has experience with that knows this. And I want to say I applaud Nathaniel for staying where he is. I live in North Carolina. We have to have people fight for us because that a lot of people just don't have the knowledge of this. When I go out and I tell people about my story, they will always come up to me afterwards and say, 4 years old? I thought it was like a social contagion or something like that. And I would say, no, it's not. It's not a social contagion. We are born with an identity that is different from our body. And we have to give children the space. We have to give teenagers the space. And we have to give adults the space. And at age 52, I was probably going to die early. I was overweight. I drank too much. I had no love for myself and I knew I couldn't continue. And that's why I went to a support group and I learned there's a whole new world out there. And since I have transitioned, life has changed for me for so much the better. I don't want to take everyone's time here, but I will tell you that that's my story. And I go out and I tell people my story because most people don't know what we go through or what their children might be going through. And it's my goal to help them understand. And I'll just add on here, this is why Transgender Day of Visibility is so important to us. And I appreciate you all doing this because we have to be seen. We have to help people understand. If someone knows a person who is transgender, they are more than 3 times as likely to accept us in the community. I'll stop there.
Well, and I'm going to ask you to add on to it just a little bit, but you can see
Okay.
the joy. I think the
Yes.
joy on your face is evident. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm glad that it sounds like you're in a better place now,
Much
that you
better.
can be your authentic self. So thank you. But you're counseling a lot of businesses. You're consulting with businesses as that because you've learned from your journey. And I guess I'd like to ask you, much like we heard from Nathaniel, what are those recommendations that you would put out there for companies or for members of ERGs even to be more supportive? Is there 1 or 2 things you might recommend as part of your overall goal?
Yes, and the genesis for my company was speaking at a chamber meeting. It was the Raleigh Chamber, and I talked about being a transgender employee. And afterwards, there were a line of people saying, I have a transgender employee. I don't know what to do. Or we had somebody apply. And that's how I thought, well, I hope to provide companies ways that they can better treat their transgender employees. Almost 90% of transgender employees have had negative experiences in the workplace. I know I had negative experiences. We have 20% of people that are transgender have come out. What about those other 60%? There are ways you can change your policies, your health policies. You can have support within your HR system. So when somebody calls HR and they say, I am transgender and I want to start living my authentic truth, then HR can provide steps for you. Companies should be very inclusive and they should provide ERGs, which again, as I mentioned, that's employee resource groups, provide support by sponsoring events. There are many events that companies can sponsor to help show that they are being inclusive. And let me add, we all know that companies do better that are more diverse and inclusive. And I have companies coming to me now saying, we have Gen Z coming in, and it's almost 30%. They identify as LGBTQ. What can we do? Because they're asking us about our policies. Are you an inclusive company? It doesn't even matter what's going on in these legislatures and these places where laws are being passed. It is good business, and they know that. And millennials and Gen Zs, they are going to be taking over the workplace over the next few years. And the way that I talk to companies is make sure you're providing an inclusive space. Make sure they can change their name in the directory. Make sure that allies have avenues to support these employees and even go to events for them. Because the number one way that we survive is to have people support us. And I emphasize that to companies all the time. Make sure managers, especially line managers, have been trained in how to treat their transgender or even any employee that might be perceived as different from the majority.
I love what you're saying because so often we forget that we want others to be allies. We say we want others to be allies for us overall, but we can be allies to each other so
Yes.
easily.
Yes.
Just in making sure we're asking those questions of how are you today, and having those ongoing conversations. So I think both of you have emphasized there are things we can do within with our employee resource groups and within our companies that can make a big difference. Shan, I'm going to move on to you. So I'm giving you fair warning. I understand this is one of your first times sharing a little bit more about your journey. And so a big thank you to you, because that we know is not always easy the first time you're talking out loud to a group like this. But I'd like you to share a little bit about your journey and also tell us a little bit about how what you're doing. I understand you bridge that social equity and community development with entrepreneurship, and that decision to really, how does that all come together for you personally on how you focus on positive change?
Yes, can y'all hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. Yeah, I am a little nervous, but I've been working on myself for the last 3 years about getting out speaking a little bit more. But as far as me, I grew up most of my life, I identified as lesbian. That's what I knew. I was on the more masculine side. And throughout my life, I've just always been that person that has empathy for like every being. And I think a lot of that is attributed to, I'm Black, and I live all my life has been in marginalized communities. And so I've always had that empathy of wanting more for myself, wanting more for my community. And so it pretty much led to entrepreneurship when it came to, I was a teacher for 8 years. Actually, I was a special education teacher, a math teacher for 8 years. And then I got into real estate. And through all that life, again, I had my struggles even as being a masculine presenting lesbian, especially when I got into entrepreneur route. And for me, I feel like I don't know if I was just fortunate enough. I didn't really receive any like discrimination or anything like that. It was more of my own fears. It was more intrinsic issues with me and thinking people didn't want to do business with me. And so as I navigated through that life, I think the pandemic. So this is all recent. I've always known I was just different ever since I was little, but I grew up in a small town in Texas. And so I didn't have a lot of resources, or like even going back, listening to some of the trends, individual online and YouTube, things like that. It remind you, I'm almost 40 years old. Actually, Friday, I'll be 38 years old. And all of this is just coming up in the last 4 years. And I think the pandemic really hit me hard. All of us was sitting there, feel like our life was ending. And for that moment, for me, I just took a lot of time to really dig deep inside of myself. And I had a lot of insecurities when it came to how I look, how I felt, body dysphoria, things like that. And I'm watching all the YouTube videos and I see all these young kids on YouTube talking about their transition and things like that. And to be honest, they say the youth is the future. And for me, that was the youth that actually helped me realize that I can start my journey. And so last year, actually this month, has made a year since my top surgery. So when I tell you everything is new for me, everything is new for me. And so, and I'm 4 months on testosterone. So for those of you out there, it's never too late. And so now transitioning into my new self, also transitioning to my company. I had those fears prior as a lesbian, but now for me, I'm taking what I learned in that journey and apply it to my journey now as I help with marginalized communities with social equity. And we do everything. We want to bridge that gap, because what we've noticed is that when it comes to marginalized communities, and I mean, there's so many different types of marginalized communities out there. I can't even name them all, but a few for me. Number one, I'm Black. I identify now as trans, non-binary. And on top of that, I am a type 1 diabetic. So I fit in a lot of different boxes, right? And so, and as I was going through things, trying to figure out life and try to figure out what I wanted to do towards my business, is definitely helping marginalized communities is a must, especially when we come to different programmings. there's a lot of gaps that we are missing when it comes to helping marginalized communities, and a lot of things that people that don't understand marginalized communities, they tend to look over or feel like it's not important. So my company is there to help execute those. So I'm not DEI, but in a way I am, in a sense, because DEI does bridge gaps, but I want to get in the weeds and actually look and streamline these programs, especially when it comes to housing. Most of you don't know that when it comes to the trans community, home ownership is almost non-existent. Okay, I don't have the statistics off my head. Even when we talk about even nationally, national organizations. I did some research because I think now my entrepreneurship is leading me towards marginalized communities when it comes to transgender or trans TGX folks. It's only 4 cents of every $100 are actually given to the trans community. And so that's a gap that I'm now focusing on when it comes to TGX folks. And so I'm always learning, I'm always growing. And so for the young ones that might be on the line or, are older, whatever the case, there's someone in between, like I guess I am, it's never too late. And so I feel like I'm rambling now, but I just want everybody to know that, especially with the environment of the world right now, that love will prevail. And if you find your community, I promise you, you will be that light in the community. So no matter what marginalized community you're a part of, and even if you're part of various communities, find your community, and I promise you, there is light and love in those communities. And we all can take personal accountability to um, um, really sit back and look at what we're doing, and are we really helping the most marginalized people and not further oppressing them. So that's a little bit, I hope I answered your question. I'm
Absolutely.
rambling. I'm rambling
No, there
on,
was
but
no
yeah.
rambling there whatsoever. You did a beautiful job of connecting in. You got to where you are, how you personally connect in with what you're doing in your business. And I think I hope others can see. I feel like I can see just the passion that comes through in not only
Yeah.
finding your purpose, but then having it be a part of your journey from the sounds of it as well in so
Yeah.
much of what you're doing. So thank you. And if you haven't checked out the comments in the chat yet, you need to go back and do that while I ask Nico a question here, because you got a lot of kudos in there, and it'll make you feel wonderful on top of that.
Thank you.
So Nico, are you going to bring us home here with a summary of a little bit about your journey, how it fits in? Because I'm guessing, since your creative agency works to empower and uplift the queer and trans community, and that you've leveraged some of your journey in some of your business as well. But can you share a little bit about that, and really what was your decision in getting to the point of infusing so much of your identity in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting listening to all of your stories and really hearing echoes of my own story. And I think my life story is really one of finding community. I grew up in a small town. I have much of the same story. I was super young and I started dressing in boys' clothes, probably elementary school. And I remember people just asking me, "Are you a boy or a girl?" And I never really knew how to answer that because I don't really think that I knew what that meant at that time. I didn't understand the gender construct, the social construct of gender at that time. So eventually I realized that people were making fun of me. So I went back into the closet, and it created just so many emotional issues for me. Growing up, I became suicidal, ideation. I had substance abuse issues, and all these different things. And as soon as I was 17, I basically ran to the city. I couldn't get here fast enough, and I found a community that understood me. And when that happened, that is when the tides started to change for me. I started to let myself be who I was when I was younger, which is Nico. And I remember there's a lot that goes on as a trans person when you are marginalized that gets pushed into your subconscious, and you can't always see the wholest, like your whole truth. It comes in bits and pieces as you start to accept yourself. So that definitely happened to me. I was really confused at 18. All of these doctors were giving me all this information about testosterone, and I wasn't sure if it was the right decision for me. But the thing about transitioning is it doesn't happen overnight. You don't do one shot of testosterone and grow a beard. So I knew that I had some time to really evaluate if it was right for me. And I knew the first time that I did my first shot of testosterone, something just clicked inside of my mind. And, I actually went on to get a psychology degree, and I wrote a couple of different papers on the neurobiology of being trans, and I really encourage people to check out the Gender Mosaic, which is really about our genes and how our tissues are patterned with our chromosomes. And gender really just is not biologically as simple as male or female. I have so many intersex friends. I have so many trans friends who have vastly different experiences, and I think our goal here is to create a society where we can really be ourselves. But anyway, I feel like I'm rambling now. But to come back to my business, when I found that community, I was able to heal, and I was able to heal from a lot of that depression, a lot of that substance abuse. And, I found so many resources within the community through these events, and I truly believe that they saved my life. So it became my life mission at that time to create those spaces for other people. And not only just physical spaces, which I think are a very impactful part of the queer experience. Nightclubs aren't just, spaces for partying during the AIDS crisis. It is, a place where we came to be safe and get resources when the rest of the world didn't understand us. So I really do view these physical spaces as extremely important, but also space in media and representation. Because if we don't see trans people growing up in our billboards, in our TV shows, in, all the different things that we see, we ingest every day on social media, then how are trans kids supposed to know that they can grow up? So yeah, it's really became my life mission to, create corporate campaigns, create visual storytelling campaigns, and create spaces. And that's what we do at Rosen Creative House. So yeah.
I think we've now heard from some incredible people, incredible business owners that we can all learn a little bit more from. And I'm going to actually tie that into a question that we got from Crystal. Crystal, thank you, because I see that it caught some energy in the chat as well as I think Deanna, you helped to answer it a little bit, but Crystal asked basically, if we don't have employee resource groups, what are great resources for either starting one or getting permission from your employer, but then also how can we leverage our chambers? And Deanna, I'm going to first, because I understand that you are involved in a chamber, and maybe you can share a little bit about that chamber question. And then Nathaniel, maybe I'll ask if you can pop in about the employee resource groups, if you have any insights. Deanna?
Sure, I'd love to answer that. At our Chamber of Commerce, we provide LGBT certification, but we also have many members who do consulting for groups that are or companies that are wishing to form ERGs, and that helps them. I am also a member of SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management. There's a lot of talk in SHRM chapters all throughout the country about ERG groups. So that's one of the things that I mentioned. But as a Chamber of Commerce, when a company comes to us and says, we do want to start an ERG group, we do have a list of resources. The great thing about a Chamber of Commerce that is LGBTQ is that we combine the business aspect with the personal aspect. And companies do not have a lot of places they can go and get resources on that unless they can go somewhere to a business chamber and say, we want to start one, or we've just started one. How do we keep this going? What we try and do is provide them the information, the people they should reach out to, and other resources. And that's why I love being part of Harmony's Chamber in Raleigh.
Excellent. Nathaniel, I see you're answering a question, but do you have any more to add to that? Because I might add to it if you don't.
Well, it's one of those where, as I said, the company that I worked at before this, I would have gotten fired for speaking out because they weren't focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And really, I think it's a great thing that we have Deanna on here, because I think we need more companies to work with folks like Deanna and other consultants to understand more about what's happening and the impact that employee resource groups can make.
Totally agree. And when you're making that case to your employer, if you have the ability and the safety to do so, a lot of us have done it. So make sure you're using this network of people and professionals who've been there and done that. I know within our industry, at the time when we started ours, and it was a ways back now, just being able to say, this is what our competitors are doing, and this is how they're going to attract the talent better than we are if we don't do this. That was a huge door opener to starting the conversation about what was needed and what some of the differences are. I do find a lot of times our companies or our people, if it's not in their lives, they just don't know about it. It's not that they're closed to it, but they may not know what they don't know. And I think I'm hearing that from some of you as well, that it's how do we open those doors?
And Chris, just to add on to that, we're hearing from companies that, I'll go back to the younger generation, the Gen Zers and the millennials are asking companies, do you have ERG groups? And not just for LGBTQ, for Blacks, for people that are women or associated. We even have faith-based ERGs. So there's a lot of publicity about ERGs, and your company should know about it, that they can get to those. So I mean, I'm a member of the Black ERG, and I love being a part of that. It's a way that we all hear stories from different people.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I understand that each of you, and other than Nathaniel, are certified, have an LGBT certified business. Can I ask what has that certification meant to you, and how have you been able to leverage it? And you can answer either of those questions, but Nico, can I come to you first on this, since you got the last one on the last question?
Sure, yeah. I'm kind of new here, so I'm really enjoying it. I learned about the certification through I was part of a transgender entrepreneurship program in the city through the transgender district. And really, to me, I think what it means is you're able to find other people who have the same values as you. And I really am about voting with your dollars. So I know who I want to work with if I need an event space, or if I need a fashion designer, or if I need somebody to do my styling. A lot of the people I've worked with do have that NGLCC certification. So it's kind of just, a signpost of I'm serious about what I do, and also I have the same values as you. So it's saves a lot of time. Yeah.
That B2B element of it can really, we're seeing that really being a big boost. Even if you don't land the big corporate contract, a lot of times the interaction that we have in supporting each other is just as powerful, if not more so. So thank you for pointing that out. Shan, do you have any suggestions for us in here, or what does it mean to be certified?
For me, I've been part of our local chapter here in Houston for about 6 years now. And I think certified for about 4 or 5. But what I've noticed is going to the conferences, just being able, the matchmaker events, actually being able to meet with the corporations one-on-one, things like that has been beneficial. And then I also just like I've been on my journey, my company has been on this journey too, trying to figure out the right right path and footing. And so I feel like the last year and a half or so, I've been able to make some great connections, and kind of bothering some of the people that I meet along the way, part of the chambers nationally. And so they're very welcoming and warming and connecting me with corporations. So in my space, I have to deal with a lot of, or I deal with a lot of government entities. And so just pestering a lot of those companies up there that, hey, I'm LGBTBE certified and can I set up a meeting with you? Things like that is, it hasn't led to anything yet, but I know just like anything else, you have to stay consistent and work towards it. And so I'm hopeful I'll be working with one of the corporations using my LGBTE certification. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Deanna? Oh, you're on mute, I think. Either that or I just can't hear you.
No, I apologize. Love talking to myself on the screen. I apologize. I meant to say the Black employees that are at corporations, but my point is there could be an ERG for everybody. Now, to go back to your question about LGBTEs, I love what Nico and Shan just said. Let me add, for me, this year when I'm at NGLCC, I can participate in the matchmaking as an LGBTE, and that's why it's important to me.
Excellent. Excellent. We just had another question pop in here, and I'll ask you to take a look out there, but maybe you can wrap your answer into like a final advice question for everyone else out there. What would, if you had one element of advice, one piece of advice for the people on this webcast, and I'm going to start with you, Nathaniel, so put your thinking cap on. What would that piece of advice be for showing your support for a transgender expansive business or transgender expansive individual that that you know and are aware of, and how you can be supportive as an ally in this community? Nathaniel, you want to kick us off?
Sure. It's one of those where first, I think educate yourself. Don't expect them to educate you. I mean, do as much research as you can. And then from there, if you have questions, say, hey, I read this or I looked at this. Can you tell me if this is right or wrong? And really, I think that's been the journey that I've gone on. And, you know, being a part of the Pride Employee Resource Group, and being the transgender advocacy director for Spencer Pride, all of those things have helped me learn so much and have taught me so much. And so really just do your best to get involved where you can.
Excellent. Fantastic advice. Shan, you have some advice for us?
Yes. As far as I guess I want to kind of break it up. For the trans businesses out there, keep grinding, keep going at it, find your community. And if you have a passion for what you do, I promise you, like I used to be one of those early business people who are like, oh, this is not going to work. When I hear people say it'll work, it'll work. You just got to stay consistent. I used to think it was a bunch of baloney. But I promise you, if you do, it's a good few years for me to really get to this point and really believe that it could work. So just if you believe in it, wake up every day and work your ass off. And I promise you, it will come, and find your community. As far as organizations, just like that statistic I told you earlier, 4 cents of every $100, 4 cents of every $100 goes to the trans community. Look at your budgets, reallocate, figure out what you're doing for the trans community to help lift them. And that's for any organization, really look at those dollars. For organizations that's looking to hire, there are some very talented TGX folks out there. You would be very surprised. And so definitely look and see what you could do there. And as far as allies, just continue to show us your love. We need you to stand up and speak out. So that would probably be my saying for the end part of that.
Excellent. Got a few to-dos there. And I know I think there's a question in the questions for NGLCC that I'll ask you all to handle, because we're going to finish wrapping up with our advice here. Nico, what's your advice?
Well, I really love what Shan said about investing in trans businesses. I really am about wealth redistribution, and I think it can kind of be hypocritical if we think all of these amazing values of openness, but we're not actually putting our money where our mouth is, and we're still investing in previous systems that are actually harming our planet, our social systems, and everything. And so, we can't change, the systems that we're born into. They are how they are, but we can find ways to tweak it in ways that actually do work for us and evolve with us as a society. For example, the events that I throw, we are mostly working off of sponsorship, and that sponsorship. Last year, we were able to give $80,000 to queer and trans artists that were then able to use those dollars to really invest in building their own businesses. And I don't think people really understand how hard it is to get employment as a trans person. So, it really, especially as an artist, so it really it really matters. The money that you spend in that regard really matters, but also just minimizing assumptions in general and increasing respect. And that's a pretty good rule for everything.
Excellent. Yeah. Deanna, any advice for us? Closing advice?
I would just add, just listen, please, just listen. So many people, there's so much information out there. Don't be afraid just to walk up to someone and say, hey, I'd love to know more about this. What's your experience? How would you like to be known as? What are your pronouns? And what is your experience here? Because as I said before, I think we truly need to communicate our stories to each other, and we gain so much more of a deeper understanding of everybody when we do that. So don't be scared, just accept and learn about someone else's experience. You never know, you might become an ally one day. That's it.
Well, very well said. And I'm just going to throw in my 2 cents as well. And that is, there is a lot happening this year. We know with the upcoming political cycle, we're already seeing more anti-LGBT bills being introduced than ever before. So become aware, know what's happening, at least in your state. I'd ask you to be thoughtful about how this is impacting the people around us, because each of us, we heard from Nathaniel what those are doing and what those laws are doing in Indiana, and how it's impacting us. But it's impacting us in each of the states that we're in different ways. And so we'll just ask people, please be aware and please do what you can. And more than ever, let's keep taking care of each other. I thank you all for sharing your stories, because oftentimes we are incredibly privileged to be able to speak and share our advice, our insights, and our stories in a safe space like this. So thank you to NGLCC for allowing us the safe space in order to do that. And I'd say, Gunnar, do you want to take over and take us home?
Most certainly. Chris and every one of our panelists, thank you all again so very much for being with us today. And thank you to all who were able to attend. This has been such a joy just to see so much collaboration, even like in the chat. This has been such an engaging program and webinar. I can't thank you all again so much for attending, and for our panelists again for sharing all of your stories. This has been incredibly insightful, just personally for me as well. So I truly appreciate all that you've shared with us today. Thank you all again so much for joining. Please be sure to stay engaged with your local chambers of commerce and stay engaged with everything that NGLCC is doing for all of our future webinars and talks, our Sip and Pitch Fridays that we do. And as you all leave today, just leave with love and kindness. And I think Sean Franklin said it in the chat, vote. It's a very important thing. So thank you all so much, and hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.